Hello, good evening, everybody on the Organic Education Facebook page. Hopefully, a few of you are going to come in and join us live this evening, or maybe you'll be watching it on catch up. Hello and welcome. My name is Alice Kimasia, and I am joined this evening by my eldest son, Elias. Hi, oh, I see Sophie's watching. Look, you've got a fan, Elias. Do say hi in the comments if you're there so that we know that you can see and hear us and who you've got tuning in. And tonight we are going to talk about Elias's self-directed learning journey and my facilitation of it. Hi Claire, I see Claire. So that's great because it means people can see and hear us, Elias. So we're live. Cool. I think that it's really nice for people here on this page to meet a grown unschooler or self-directed learner, because often when your kids are younger, you perhaps don't get to meet children who've been educated outside of school, and to hear their stories, and to hear them talk about their own journey and to reflect on it a little bit. And I'm hoping that it will just really encourage those of you who've got younger children, and perhaps allay some fears for some of you. And I know there can be lots of anxieties and worries about our children's education as they get a bit older. Oh, I can see my mum has joined us, which is nice. Hello. And hopefully a few more people will join the conversation. So do comment with any questions that you've got for Elias or for myself, and we will do our best to answer them. Hopefully we'll be able to see all your comments this evening. Last month we had a bit of a problem with the comments, so hopefully we won't have that issue this evening. This is the 5th of my fourth Fridays of the month at 8 p.m. here on the Organic Education page. I do a live, push myself out of my comfort zone and talk about organic home education. So great that you can join me. I asked the question in promoting tonight's live, what if? And I wonder what that brings into your mind. Does it bring you kind of fear and concern? What if something awful happens? What if things don't turn out the way I hope? What if I don't know what I'm doing? Or does the question, what if, fill you with possibility and with imagination? What if we could facilitate learning differently? What if our children's education looked different? And when Elias was 7, I saw his lights go out. And I've always described it that way. It was like the light in your eyes went out. And I felt we needed to do something different. And I felt like, maybe you can reflect a bit on this, Elias, you'd kind of shut down, and you stopped asking questions. You'd always had a stream of questions and chatter. And I don't know if that was maybe from school. Do you remember? That's a long time ago for you to remember. No, that was a long time ago. I do remember at school, the teacher would say you needed to sit down and you needed to be quiet and listen, and you'd be often asking lots of questions. And I think that is a way that you like to learn, isn't it? Yeah, definitely. Still, so it felt a little bit like school was kind of shutting you down. And so I took a risk, and we took you out of school. And I felt at the time that it would have been a risk to leave you in school. I'm sure it was a risk taking you out, but it would have been a risk to leave you in. So maybe you can tell us, kind of how old you are now and what you're doing now. Yeah.
So I'm now 19 years old. I am in my first year, or I'm in the year group in their first year at university. I'm currently an apprentice, working for a company called WMG, Warwick Manufacturing Group, which is a sub-company of Warwick University. we do research for lots of international engineering companies and governments. Is that a good intro?
Yeah, I think that's a good intro. And
Okay.
people can put questions in the chat if they have them. I can see Fadzai and Joanna joined us. Hi. So you're in an apprenticeship and you kind of chose that route rather than doing A levels and going to university. Why did you make that choice?
Mainly because I wanted to get out of school as soon as possible, because I did rejoin school to do my GCSEs, just because I thought it would be easier, and in a sense, it is very easy because schools are so well set up for exams. But then as soon as I got the opportunity to get out, I took it, and that was the apprenticeship.
Yes, Grandma's saying you were headhunted. You kind of were, because you've made some inroads, haven't you, into that company through a project, which we'll talk about a bit later. But how do you think your unconventional educational background helped you in getting the apprenticeship? Do you think it did?
Well, I think for that we should go into the project.
Oh, talk about the projects first.
Is this a good time to go into it or not?
Yeah, I was just kind of going to talk about what you're doing now first to show people where you've kind of ended up. Like about your portfolio, you could say.
I think we do a timeline.
Okay, give us a timeline then of your educational journey.
8-year-old me gets taken out of school. Not loads of online resources. This is back in what, 2010?
Yeah.
So not as many online resources as there is now. So Mum would often get very stressed about the way in which, like, the best way to educate me and my other brothers. And obviously I'm sure a lot of people can resonate with that same feeling of, especially if you're early in home education, you don't really know how to facilitate the education. You might think that a teacher can do it better, but the first probably 3 years, right, was mainly education based off curriculums that have been made by someone else, and they were kind of mimicking school, but all based from home, obviously. I quickly began to dislike that, and I know it caused a lot more tension between me and Mum, because I would want to go off, do my own thing, and she was there like, no, that's too risky, we should stick with this curriculum that someone else has invented. Anyway, eventually, as I got older, I took more control myself of the way that I educate myself, and it became less, especially, I think this is, once you've got the skill of reading and writing and the internet, you can learn anything. Simply, search up some questions and there are all of the answers. You just need to be able to read and write. Once we got to that point, my education very quickly became more intrinsic and more, the curriculum was more invented by myself. I wouldn't even call it a curriculum, because it wasn't that strict and I hadn't made it that strict. It was more just me researching what I found interesting, which happened to be engineering in my case, and obviously it's been quite successful, as we can see the results now. What did you think when I started doing random things?
Well, you fought me, really.
Okay.
At least that's how I remember it feeling. It felt like you fought me as my eldest child, the eldest one who has to kind of blaze the trail for the others that come behind you. Hey, you fought me really for the right to learn in a way that suited you. And it was me with the ideas in my head of what I felt we needed to do or what we should be doing, what other people thought we should be doing, that made me pull back to the safety of those kind of curricula and things that we found online. And then as I began to see more and more what you were doing, that helped me then to go with it more, right? So I think Elias, I mean, you used to get up in the morning and you would have a very clear idea in your mind of what you wanted to do that day. And you would tell me, you know, in the morning you'd say, right, today I want to do this. And they were good, interesting things, you know, creative, exploratory things. And I would then in my own mind have my own list of what I thought we were going to be doing that day. And so there was quite a time of a negotiation where we were trying to figure out how to work together at home, I guess. And I learned to relax and to trust you more and to allow you to lead the learning more.
This is probably another really good point for anyone that's any parents that are bringing up kids and have decided to go for home education. I'm sure that they'll also hit points where it actually feels like it's damaging your relationship. Is that accurate?
Yeah, because it's quite intense, isn't it? I mean, you and I used to be quite intense.
No, but like you said, once you began to relax a bit more, then it actually got better for everyone, really.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And I don't think it was of any detriment to my education at all.
No, so. I agree. No, in fact, I would say the opposite. I would say actually me being able to relax into that and just to trust things more, to observe more what you were doing and then kind of join in and facilitate that actually meant that the learning was much richer, much deeper. And it surprised me often, you know, where those learning adventures would take us and where you wanted to push further and deeper. I mean, some of the things you did were really cool. Even if at the time they were quite daunting to me. And one of the reasons for that, Elias, is that I am not at all, am I, engineeringly inclined. And that was always really your passion. And so for me to be able to relax into that and to facilitate that was quite challenging.
No, I think that's important because if you hadn't relaxed into the fact that I was doing something that you couldn't really help me with, if you hadn't relaxed into that, then I would have been forced to do things that are your strengths.
Yeah.
But like, what's the point? Because the whole point of home education is you can be more flexible, and that was important that I could do what I needed to do to help me learn to become the engineer that I am now.
Yeah, that's true. And you were then able, weren't you, to pursue your passion, and I was able to see that then and go with it. But it took some battling.
Is it that bad? I don't remember it being that bad.
Oh, I remember it being intense for a while. And we would I remember there would be clashes between us, just where it was my agenda against, you know, your kind of agenda. And we had to kind of figure it out. And that did involve a change in me as the educator, being able to kind of let go and trust things more, and trust you as a learner, right? Because I do have this belief that children learn. That's what you're kind of wired to do.
Well, I think my education was more, I've just thought about it this way. I wasn't taught stuff. I more research stuff, and that difference between research and teaching to learn, I think, makes a massive difference in how much you retain. The amount of effort you have to put in is obviously greater for research, but the reward is also far greater.
Yeah, you were figuring things out for yourself. And Joanne is asking, let's pull that question up because that's a great one actually for this moment. did you make use of any engineering experts to supplement and support you?
Yes. Let me just think about how I'm going to put this forward.
Yeah, he did, and I can just say as the facilitator as well that part of my role then also became helping you to find and make those connections, and encourage you to make those connections.
I think 90% of the experts that I would interact with were online, mainly YouTube, because you get all these guys that are so specialist, and it's so easy to access. And that's why I would say that made up 90% of the information that I was gathering was from people on YouTube. In terms of connections in real life, engineering clubs were great. And then other connections through them were also great. A lot of real connections with guys that were experienced and very open-minded. People like, even, here's a great example. We had our kitchen extension done and our patios laid, and I spent weeks, because I was at home, absorbing all of the knowledge, and I'd get involved. Here and there, they'd let me lay some bricks, lay some slabs, mix some concrete, and all these little skills that I was picking up on the job. I wouldn't have had that opportunity if I was at school. And although I don't use them now, it's a great example of how you can learn from someone just from observing rather than from, if I was stuck in a classroom, I'd be watching a video and it's just not the same. Even there was a chemist who used to go to our church and he'd invite me around for chemistry lessons, and they weren't like your bog standard chemistry lessons. We did, one that was very memorable was the amount of science behind a jelly. Sounds simple, but when you go into it in depth with, wasn't he a doctor in chemistry? When you go into it in depth with someone who's got a doctorate in chemistry, the amount of stuff in a jelly is really impressive, and also how it then relates to engineering. You know, you can take a jelly and you can actually make it. You can take that knowledge and you can apply it to plastics. You can apply it to the chemicals in a lot of products, and it's very interesting the way that you can learn and the way that you can build up off learning in different ways.
Yeah, that's true. I remember also there was a guy, wasn't there, up the road, who had his old Jag in the garage. We went round and did some welding with him, and you used to go down to the local garage, didn't you, and chat to them and ask questions. And so there were always lots of other people around, and I think you were also really good at putting yourself alongside people who knew more. Like, you understood the importance of finding mentors and learning from people.
We had some neighbours. I was 13 at the time, and they were university students, and they remind me of me now, and they used to modify their cars on their drive 2 doors down. And I used to go and hang out with them, and they'd just talk me through what they were doing, and I just thought it was so cool. And obviously absorbed as much knowledge as possible, just because I was there and I was interested. It just naturally taught me.
Yeah, there's lots of really good questions coming in, some of which we're going to cover because we've got a kind of little vague plan of where we're going with our conversation. But Claire says, Elias, that this is a great comment because this is just like you, really. My youngest can't stand being taught, but he loves researching things that he's interested in, and he needs to discover things himself, which was definitely that was you, wasn't it? You were like that too. Can't get the comments closed now. How did I do that before? Maybe it will just disappear. Let's try that one up. Yeah, I'm always too impatient, aren't I? And my expectations were certainly much more schoolified because that was all that I'd really know, you know, and you have a kind of idea in your head of what learning should look like, what it needs to look like. And I trained as a teacher as well, so I was even more kind of ensconced in the schooly way of doing things. But how do you think you defined learning, like when you were younger?
It's just the gain of knowledge. It doesn't really matter how you get there. So if you need to research, then you need to research. If you need to be taught, then you need to be taught. If you need to find someone to teach you, you need to find someone to teach you, whether that's in a school or on YouTube.
YouTube was it was a great resource.
YouTube was massive. I would spend weeks in my room binge watching YouTube channels that I discovered and found extremely interesting. And some channels that were 5 years old, I'd spend a week on as YouTube channels. And that, from your point of view, might have been quite worrying. But then I'd come out, and I think a great example was a YouTube channel called Mighty Car Mods, and they modify cars. And they're Australian, so they had a lot of Japanese cars because the Australians and the Japanese are so close. Loads of Japanese cars end up in Australia, and they happen to work with a manufacturer called Daihatsu. And my grandma had a Daihatsu that failed its MOT due to rust. And that car I then asked for, it was only worth, what, 20, 30 pounds of scrap metal. Honestly, that was like the best investment. I found this YouTube channel who have grown massive now because they're so good, and they happen to be working on these Daihatsus when they were a really young channel. And this Daihatsu, Mum and Dad probably had some bad memories of this as well, but
there was a lot of mess, but
it got completely torn apart. Every single part got taken off that car, and in the end, it was just the shell of a car, and that got chopped up as well. The engine came out. The engine was sitting in a room. I cleaned it, and it was just sitting in a room, and I could take it apart and put it back together again. And this was I was 12 or 13 years old.
13, I think, yeah.
And I was rebuilding this engine. And later, a few years ago, in my apprenticeship, I got trained on dismantling an engine. And I was like, oh, well, I've played with these before. So
that was a great project. And that went on for quite a long time, didn't it?
That's all come from YouTube, and then an opportunity with a car. And I've learned so much, and I've gone on to my apprenticeship and just found it so easy from such a simple, self-motivated line of learning through that project.
Yeah. And if we backtrack from there, before the car, like that was a step up from your
radio control cars and Lego.
Yeah, and Lego Technic.
Lego was massive.
You loved that, didn't you?
Yeah.
So certainly, like in your primary years, I'm thinking you were doing lots of Lego.
And then the other thing that's worth pointing out with the Lego is get a kit and it would last a day, and then it wasn't a kit anymore. It was a collection of parts and opportunities to put something together. The radio control car kits I didn't like because they were a kit, but the Lego you could do whatever you wanted with. Mm-hmm. So I took these Lego Technic cars and I was like, well, could I make it better? And of course, over time I found a way to do that. And that was actually less through YouTube. That was just through determination, experimentation, different kits, which gave me ideas, and then putting them all together.
You weren't a fan, were you, of following instructions?
No, I'm still not.
And that was true of Lego kits or whatever. Like you much preferred to. You would make. I think you did make the kit, but then you would
make the kit. I'd make the kit, learn from the kit.
Yeah.
And then often I wasn't happy with the kit, so then I'd have to modify it to make it more suited to whatever I was doing. I remember we had a toy slide. This was when my youngest brother Zephan was how old? 2 years old, 3 years old. So this was 5 years ago. I was maybe 13, and then that slide was a solid 45 degree, really steep, and I was like, well, I want to be able to drive my Lego cars up there, because real life Land Rover Defenders can drive up something like that. So surely I can make a radio control car that does the same. And I designed one. I built a gearbox in order to allow the motors to pull it up, and build these cars all for specific purposes, because the kits just couldn't do it.
No, and you did like to. You like to work outside the box, and I think you, yes. I sort of something else then. Yeah, even when sometimes we would go to clubs, wouldn't we, or workshops. There used to be quite a lot of good workshops that we tried to take you along to that were, had a science theme, or a STEM or engineering kind of theme. But you very much preferred activities where it was open-ended and where you could explore and do your own kind of thing, didn't you? Rather than following instructions or the way that someone else was showing you how to do it. Do you remember any of those?
I'm just looking at the comments.
Yes, there's quite a few.
That question from Claire.
Oh, this one?
Yeah, I think it's worth answering that.
Oh, there were projects. Yes, there were definitely projects outside my comfort zone. Oh, the one about the hydrogen generator. Oh, the rockets. Oh my goodness, Claire.
Some of them, to be honest, weren't safe, and I didn't realise that at the time.
No, so a lot of particularly, I think between the ages of 11 and 14, when he was kind of in key stage 3 stage of education, I felt like a lot of my job involved keeping you safe and keeping the parameters around things to make sure that you were safe. And I think at that age, you very much wanted to experiment and kind of push the boundaries, and you wanted challenge and risk that was uncomfortable to me. And so trying to kind of facilitate that stage of your education was quite challenging. But wrapped in that, you did have some really cool project ideas that you wanted to pursue. So talk the rockets, rocket cars.
Before going any further, I think I did them quite safely, all things considered. But if your kids are anything like me, then make sure you get them, invest in some protective equipment like glasses, goggles, face shields. Going on from that, the hydrogen generator that ran off mains electricity generated a mix of hydrogen and oxygen, which is a suitable rocket fuel, and it was great to fill balloons with and then blow up. What was the point that we were going to make from this house? How they put you out of your comfort zone?
Yeah, how to support projects that were outside of my comfort zone. So we had the tech club, and the tech club was really fun.
Most of the stuff I was doing was also tried and tested because I had found it on YouTube. I think that was useful. I tried to build rocket motors from scratch. Some of them turned out really good. I remember we had one rocket that flew. I don't know how far.
Yeah, and we had a little tech club. We got together with some other families, and we kind of facilitated this STEM club. Well, you did actually, and I was just hosting really. But you brought your interest and passion to it, I think, and there were 4 or 5 families, weren't there? We'd get together.
Yeah.
So we did, and that was kind of fun because then we were doing the projects together. And there were more of us around to support you all, but we kept it open-ended, didn't we? So you were still able to run with the brief and end up with quite unique creations, I remember. And I remember we raced those rocket-powered cars down the drive.
Yeah.
And we took some rockets across we have like an open ground across the road, like a common, and we took the rockets over there, didn't we, as a club, to kind of launch them, which that put me a little bit out of my comfort zone. But it was good fun doing it together with others. But you did used to have big ideas.
Yeah.
And Elias wanted to build a gym.
I did build a gym.
You did build a gym. You wanted to build a bunker.
I did build a bunker.
I remember some sort of shelter thing.
I'm also very into my sports, and I was practicing parkour, so I built a lot of vault boxes that I could jump on and off of, So at one point we had down the bottom of the garden a tower that was 2 meters tall.
Was tall. Yeah.
It was 1 meter by 1 meter wide, 2 meters tall. It had a bar that came out of it for you to swing off. You could jump on and off of it, and then along with that corresponding some other corresponding boxes to jump on and off of. And I had loads of scrap wood that I would collect.
Pallets
or be given, and then there was a time that me and my brothers, how old were we at the time, 12 maybe, and we wanted to play army or
Commandos it was, wasn't it? Yeah.
So I built a tree house at that time. I built a tree house. I built a bomb shelter, which was I can't remember how I did it, but it was a semicircle, elongated, and I somehow built that out of straight planks of wood. I can't remember how I did that.
You certainly had. You did used to get hold of a lot of pallets, and I have to give a shout out here to my dad, your grandpa, who I think is watching our live, for facilitating and helping you to use power tools safely from really when you were quite young. And so he had these skills which you improved upon as you grew older, but you wanted at one point a welder.
Yeah, I think you bought me a welder when I was on my 13th birthday.
Yeah, something like that.
And I started welding my own stuff.
And that did worry me, to make sure that you were safe and that you understood all the safety regs and so on. And I think it did help me, Claire, having other adults around to help facilitate that as well. But I didn't feel like it was just me. You know, my parents have always been very supportive. Dad's been really good with you with practical projects. Grandpa, my dad, and then we'd also tap into these other resources in the community around us to help you to kind of bring into being your vision. And it was often big. You often had big ideas, I think it's fair to say.
You just went with them.
Yes, we tried. Yes, and that was the journey for me, was learning to relax and facilitate rather than just kind of thinking, oh, well, you can't do that, it's impossible.
I think for any parents that have kids that are like me and that want to experiment and with things that are straight up, no, let me change that. Not straight up dangerous, but that could be hazardous and could cause danger. Just make sure that you put extra safety measures in place, like protective equipment, guards, distancing from whatever experiment is going on.
Well, I think that was part of the learning, wasn't it? It was learning to be health and safety aware. And I mean, in your current job, you've had to really get hot on health and safety regs and so on.
Yeah, when I went into the apprenticeship, for example, the first thing you're taught is the health and safety. So I think incorporating that with a lot of projects is going to help, and it can put you at ease.
I certainly felt like during those years, I think the 11 to 14 kind of stage of your learning, like trying to build in big enough challenges for you, that was a big challenge for me. So, for example, I remember when we went up Snowdon, I was there thinking we were, facilitating this grand adventure, and as my husband and I were struggling up Snowdon with our 2 other sons, you were strolling down, having already made it up to the summit. And it was just, I was struck at that point how big the challenge you needed was. I mean, since then, you love Snowdon, and I think that experience helped you to love Snowdon and the outdoors. But I mean, what with your bike now?
Yeah, I go to Snowdon every year now, and I ride down it on my mountain bike.
So we're kind of sowing the seeds, aren't we? Even if at that point you kind of, that wasn't such a big challenge for you. More a big challenge for me.
But I think it's important to let me pick the challenge, because
there we go.
If you pick a challenge that's challenging for you, it's not necessarily challenging for me.
That's the lesson.
But yeah.
Yes. So yeah, but I wonder whether we. I think there was another really good question. Oh, scouting was important too. Yes, it was. Yeah, let's just talk a bit more while we were talking there about your primary education, because some people watching will have children in their primaries, and we tried to remember, haven't we, the things that you really enjoyed at that age. So we've already mentioned Lego.
Cubs and Scouts was a massive. I loved those clubs, and they weren't just. I'm not sure if you find a good Cub or Scout group now with a good leader, then I'm sure you could have a similar experience to me, because some are like youth clubs where it's like, oh, let's go play some games. But the ones that I were in were very adventurous, very challenging, genuinely challenging. I did some really extreme camps with them. There was a camp where we didn't go with tents. All we had was sleeping bags, no matches, no matches, just flints. And we were given a rabbit and some knives, and that was it for 2 nights, 3 days. And that was a really good physical and mental challenge, as well as the structure of scouting with the whole badge system was really good, and I liked having a very decorated uniform. So every week I would be bringing in, you could describe it as coursework towards the badges, and that was for me a really big. I just found it really fun, actually. I had a lot of motivation towards it, and throughout primary years, it was really good for socializing, really good for fitness, really good for mentality, really good for
well-being.
What's the word? Discipline. Really good for discipline. That was a really useful resource that I found and really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and the Scout badge work, that gave you a lot of project work, I think, didn't it? That was quite aligned with things that you were interested in.
The Scout badge system is really, really good, and probably a lot broader than people might think. There were Scout badges for mechanics. There were Scout badges for woodwork. There were Scout badges for going back onto the subjects of health and safety. There was ones for fire safety, first aid, really useful life skills. Actually, if you look now, it makes me more employable, having just a foundation in first aid, and that was ingrained from the age of 11, right?
Yeah.
I'd really recommend if you find a really good group.
Yeah. The leader was important, wasn't it? Finding a group with a leader. It's
all down to the leader, because the leaders of each individual group get a lot of control.
Yeah.
And if they do run it, as a scout group rather than a youth group, not that there's anything wrong with youth groups, it's just not.
It's not the same. No,
but I think that could be a very beneficial thing, or at least I found it very beneficial, and I'd recommend it to anyone else.
Yeah. There were two. I'm remembering there were 2 times in your kind of primary up to 11 years where you tried school, didn't you?
Yes.
We tried flexi schooling just very briefly in year. You were year 6.
Was it every Thursday or every Friday in year 6? And
yeah. And I think there was a bit of I think you struggled because there was a bit of a culture clash really between the responsibility and the freedom, I suppose, that you enjoyed in home education and in Scouts, actually, compared with the kind of rules at school. It was difficult for you to flex between the two.
On a adventure camp with this school, and it was very much like Scouts, just not as challenging. And I was asked to lead activities. So obviously I pushed the limits as hard as I could and got in lots of trouble as a result.
Well, I think you didn't understand.
I didn't understand
what was expected.
Yeah, I thought they expected a lot more of me, but they didn't.
And so there were conversations with the teachers about that, and in the end, we didn't persevere with the flexi schooling for that reason, that it didn't really align with the values that we had at home.
I don't think it was of any benefit, to be honest.
No. So we tried it.
Yeah.
And then again, when you hit 11, you were younger, 10. You wanted to.
So when I was 10, I wanted to sit the 11 plus exam because I just wanted to sit an exam because I hadn't sat any. So we signed up. Dad said if I got an invitation to the school, he'd buy me a Lego kit. So I spent 3 days studying. How was that done? YouTube again and past papers. Went for my exams, and then weeks later, we got an acceptance letter from the grammar school. I got my Lego kit, and then I thought, oh, maybe this will be really cool. And there was other appeals, like it was in a different city, so I had to get the train and things like that.
I think the independence, like particularly the idea of going on the train with a group of friends appealed, and
they played rugby.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So there were appeals about it, and I think you set yourself the challenge as well of the 11 plus. I think you kind of were curious about where you were in terms. I think there was an element of that, wanting to just see how you got on.
I wanted to see how, like from a competitive point of view, I wanted to see if I was lacking behind other people of my age. Right?
Yeah. So you tried it, didn't you? You tried it, and then after half a term, you were.
After 6 months.
It wasn't that long.
I found certain subjects too slow, certain subjects too fast, certain subjects I had no interest in whatsoever, and it's probably because if I'd been at school, I wouldn't have known I wouldn't have known that there was a better way of educating. But obviously, having my entire 80% of my primary education was homeschooled, home educated. So when I went into the school environment, it was just a bit. It was too routine. It didn't suit my strengths. So I thought I found it pointless, and then asked you to take me out of the school.
Yeah, you wanted to come back to directing your own learning, which I remember you giving me a list of all the projects that you wanted to do if you came out of school again. So that was a kind of foray into school at year 7, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it's only very brief. And then you were out again until year 10, which we'll perhaps talk about in a minute. But let's just have a look through the questions. There's several children here who've got big ideas like you had. That's an interesting question. How much supervision or facilitation do you offer on projects, or are your children very independent learners? How do you split your time between children if they're embracing different practical projects? And I have to think back, Rebecca. They are very independent learners. I think some, like you, were more of an independent learner than perhaps your brother. And I remember that often you would work on projects together.
What, with my brother? Or?
Yeah, talking about with your brothers, particularly if they were sort of garden construction things. So often you would lead actually on project work that drew us all in, because when you did go into school for year 10, we missed you. There was a change in dynamic, and we missed your leadership actually, because you brought a lot of energy into the dynamic of the family learning. But sometimes the boys were working on different projects, and I often found that actually they didn't all need me at the same moment, so I could kind of go round between them at different times. of course, there were moments when everyone wants mum, but those moments were not as frequent as I might have thought they would be. So I could kind of manage it. Do you remember? It feels like a long time ago.
I think that by the time I was out of the grammar school and into secondary education, most of my needs were fulfilled by mainly YouTube and other internet sources.
You were quite independent, I think. Yeah, and then my concern just became making sure that you were thinking through the safety elements, and yes, so you were very independent. What's Claire saying? Yes, it usually depends on the leader with Scouts. Yeah, that's a shame. It's worth looking around and seeing if you can find a good one, if you think that would be a good thing for your child. Oh, there's Songul from Turkey tuning in to see us, Elias. Merhaba. İyi akşamlar Songul, nasılsın? That's a nice one from Grandma and Grandpa. Make room for a workshop and access to tools, which you did always have.
Yeah, that's a really good comment. That's a facilitation thing. That's a resources thing, and without any resources, it becomes really limited what you can do.
You were very fortunate with that, and Grandpa was very good at you made a workbench with Grandpa, didn't you? And
even for my birthdays, like I said, I got a welder for my birthday. A few years later, I got a 3D printer for another birthday. Or was that for Christmas?
No, that was a birthday present, and actually not as expensive as, 3D printer sounds like this incredible piece of kit. I think it was less than £100, that 3D printer.
Yeah.
And it was, you built it yourself, didn't you?
Flat pack.
And that's been a very cool.
I got a massive, I can't remember, I think it might have been a Christmas present or Christmas and birthday money. And I bought it was sufficient for the time, but I bought a Black & Decker DIY 100-piece kit, and it had a little bit of everything that I might need, and that was really useful for a lot of different things.
Any must-haves? Samantha's asking for a
Any
workshop.
Must-haves?
What would you put in a workshop?
A
drill.
Nowadays, you can get quite cost effectively a cordless electric drill, and then to go with that, some good drill bits that are designed for some for wood and also some for metal is always going to be very useful. A simple spanner set, screwdriver set, Allen keys, because screwdrivers are getting out of date. You wouldn't believe it, but what else? But this kit that I got, it was like a 100-piece kit, and it had a little bit of everything. It had everything from measuring tape, spirit level, pliers, everything.
Vice, is that a good thing?
Yeah, vice is useful to secure work properly. Clamps are useful to hold stuff properly. That's a safety thing as well. Because you don't want to be like drilling into something, let's say, and it starts spinning around and hitting you. Or saws are useful, and make sure that they're sharp, because good sharp tools are actually a lot safer than blunt ones, because you get more control. So that's a benefit. Hi, Dad.
You're in the background of the shop. It's a whole family presentation. There's a few more questions coming in, but I just thought I wanted to go on to
what's happening nowadays.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about just moving on to show people kind of where your journey took you, and then perhaps we can go back to a few more questions at the end. But you opted in to school at year 10.
Yeah, so if we set the scene, I've had this great, very focused, very self-constructed curriculum and education, which revolved purely around engineering and science. For my GCSEs, so this is year 10, 14 years old, 15 years old?
14. Mm-hmm.
I decided, I'll go to this engineering school that's set up It's sponsored by Warwick Manufacturing Group, including Jaguar Land Rover, which I was a massive fan of Land Rovers, and now I have one. Who else was it sponsored by? Massive companies. I think Aston Martin were involved, some big names. I thought, this place looks cool. I'll sign up for that. It'll be easy to get my exams because schools are an exam factory. I'll sign up. Signed up, and was shocked to see. I think the months before I was quite anxious, maybe, and I was like, I'll do lots of like academic work to prepare. And I went in, and I remember I got put in the very bottom sets because I had no previous SATs or any other data. So they were like, we'll put them in the bottom set, and then we did the what's the name for them? The entry level assessments, and I was immediately moved to the top sets. Obviously, it's an engineering school, so most of the subjects that I'd selected were maths, sciences. As a result of that, I immediately got moved up the sets because I'd done so well in those subjects, because that's all I did.
And you were fortunate, actually, that we had this engineering academy, on our doorstep, really, which was very aligned with your own passion. So it did seem like a kind of natural step for you, being so local.
I think also the projects that I was doing at home were beginning to get really, really, really big, to the point that it couldn't be facilitated.
I felt that.
And that school in particular was extremely well set up, and I think on that it's worth going into the school projects.
Yes, because you found yourself in a brilliant project, in which was a continuation, really, of the way that you've been learning at home, and I think really helped you to get through those years in school, didn't it?
So I got involved in the school's extracurricular project, the F1 in Schools competition, which is a rocket car competition, which I had already had a little bit of experience with, and it's also got massive sponsors, including I think it had sponsors from Formula One, and some machining companies, and I was really excited to get involved in this competition, and it also happened to be the most, I think it had the most participants, and therefore it was the biggest science, technology, engineering, and maths competition worldwide. It was a worldwide competition, and going into it, I was like, well, this just is my cup of tea.
And you had to be an amazing supervisor in the school, didn't you? Who wasn't a teacher, actually. He was a retired engineer, wasn't he? A volunteer.
And he was excellent, and he taught me a lot of skills that I wouldn't have been taught by the school, which made me stand out massively. Skills like computer-aided design, and I could get a license through the school. Again, things that I probably wouldn't have been able to have facilitated, that probably couldn't have been facilitated at home. And through this competition, it was not really like being at school. I got a lot of privileges through this competition because it was so important to the engineering academy, because it was an opportunity for them to really put their mark in and prove that they were really as good of a school as they were saying that they were. And we went through this competition with a lot of support. I got a lot of benefits. I could skip lessons here and there because they were so.
But you worked really hard as a team.
I'd work at home. I'd work after school. I'd work half terms. I'd work weekends.
Yeah, you did. You worked really hard.
And I built this rocket car. The level of these rocket cars and the level of this competition and the level of sponsors that we had for this competition was pretty extraordinary. We had wheels that were, they weighed, this was only a model, it was maybe 200 millimeters long.
It's like a miniature Formula One car, wasn't it?
The wheels weighed less than a gram each. They were made out of titanium using the most modern laser 3D printing technology. That's the company that we had sponsor us was a company used by Formula One and the space industry.
And very tight spec you were working to that you had to kind of meet.
Anyway, as a result of the entire team and team leaders' hard work, we made it through the regional, made it to the national, won the fastest car in the UK. They had a points system that wasn't just about the speed of the car; it was about the whole presentation of the team. We took through the points system the top team in the UK. We then went off for the world finals a year later. I was 15 years old. Traveled to Malaysia for 2 weeks. The weekend before the Malaysian Grand Prix in 2017.
That's right.
Competed in our F1 in Schools miniature F1 competition. There was scouts there from Williams F1. I met the chief engineer for the Mercedes F1 team, Toto Wolff, who's put their real F1 team through 4 or 5 World Championship titles now. Really, really cool competition, but it was facilitated by the school. But really, me and the team members, it was not a school-run competition. It was run by Bob Hodge, who was the volunteer teacher and leader for the team, and then the team who were incredibly motivated, incredibly dedicated, and also it was just what we wanted to do. It wasn't. No one on that team was. We were selected, but I think we were selected because we were so eager to be involved.
You were very intrinsically motivated. All of you had strong motivation, didn't you? And worked incredibly hard. And it was brilliant. And on the back of that, I think that you found yourself there, didn't you, then presenting before lots of local engineering companies.
We were presenting in front of some of some really high up managers from Jaguar Land Rover. We were presenting in front of some professors from Warwick University. We were presenting in front of multiple managers, and I think even the CEO or chairman, I can't remember from smaller companies that were getting involved with our team. And as a result, through these real links, not through applications, not through results from exams, through this massive portfolio and real life evidence, I got multiple offers for apprenticeships and multiple offers for further higher education. Scholarships were also on the cards, weren't they? But then the school side of things, I think that the longer I spent in school, the worse I got at. Because when I went into school, I remember I was really, really studious, really determined. Coming out of school, I'd lost a lot of that. I wanted to mess around more and just mess around more. So I came out of school instead of going for A-levels, which I think was a really good choice, and went for an apprenticeship instead, which was more professional. There's a lot more that I had to prove in the apprenticeship. I've got real managers watching me, and I think that route was a far wiser route to take.
And you're still pursuing your academics alongside it now, aren't you? So
yeah, so
it's been good.
and this is another interesting thing in the apprenticeship. It's a lot. They try to push you practically and technically. But I also wanted to do my degree, so I'm doing my apprenticeship and my degree. I've started my degree on the side as well, so I'm still educating myself, both at work and at home on my own.
And you do a lot of your own project work still. You're still a very project-led, self-directed learner.
Yeah.
I would say we've got a Land Rover in bits on our front drive currently.
Any more questions?
Yeah, we'll go to questions, because the last thing I wanted to say, really, because we've been an hour and I know that
That's
it's a lot to let people
Right.
sit. Yes, let me just bring that one up. Do you think all children are able to direct their own learning if given the chance? Do they need to be guided or left to their own devices? That is a good question.
I think this is that's quite a complicated question to answer. And I think it's very, very individual. I think the most important thing is to, if you've got a child that is determined and that wants to learn, they'll learn. That'll come naturally, in which case, no worries. That's easy. If you've got a child that's more reluctant to learn, it'll either be because they're not interested in it, in which case it probably wouldn't be a very fun career for them anyway. So maybe they don't need to learn that. Or it's because of a distraction.
I think some children maybe need more help learning to learn in that way. So
that's a good point.
You know, like all children have passions and things that they're interested in, right? And things that they want to pursue. So paying attention to that, nurturing that, enabling that. I think you know, if your child is learning in this way from a young age and you're facilitating this from a young age, then they're used to directing their own learning. If you're coming to it later, then they might need more help kind of finding their way with it and, you know, increasingly taking more control of their own learning.
I think removing distractions is very important.
That's interesting. Because
when you go to school, you don't have that many distractions, in the sense that you haven't got any access to. Most schools will have a no phone policy, so no social media, no video games, obviously, because there's no way of properly accessing them. The only distraction is talking, and you notice if you go into a school that most of the time people will just spend it chatting to each other about not about the work, which in a sense seems kind of pointless, because what's the point in being in a school for 8 hours if you're going to talk for 6 and work for 2? You might as well work for 2 and go home and play for 6 hours with your friends. I think that's where home education can be really useful. You don't have the distraction of other people. I think it's very important to be careful. And I think I was old enough that social media and online video games weren't as popular and as easy to access as they are now. But looking at my brothers, I seriously worry sometimes, you know, the amount of time that they can be spending on video games.
But Noah now, your brother Noah, who's now 15, and he's opted, rather than opting to go into school for GCSE, he's decided he's continuing to study independently and pursue his GCSEs outside of school. And so he's having to learn that. He's having to learn to manage his time, manage his... With Noah and I have a lot of conversations about this. And he is managing it in his own way and finding the time that he wants to give to his studies and so on. So, sometimes I think a young person might need more help and facilitation finding their way with it. But I think potentially, I do believe we all have the capacity to be self-directed learners, because we all have intrinsic motivation to pursue the things that we're interested in and passionate about.
I think it's important because, like you said, everyone will have a something that they find interesting and that they would become naturally motivated to do. I also think it's important that you, as a parent, because if your child doesn't have enough discipline, they're going to struggle to discipline themselves into limiting video games and social media, and that's partly to blame the companies that are creating the video games and social media.
You have a lot to say on that,
Because
but we're getting
so
short
addicting.
of time. So The Social Dilemma is the documentary you recommend on that one, Elias, isn't it?
Yeah.
But let's look at this question from Samantha before we wrap up. Any advice for a child keen on engineering but with lots of social issues, autistic, ADHD? Scouts would be amazing for him with the badges, but I think the groups would be too much for him. Any thoughts on that?
Keep the group small.
Yes.
There's a lot of, I think Elon Musk is autistic.
Okay.
And Elon Musk's the richest man in the world, and he's created 7 companies. He's probably going to be the first person to land a human on Mars.
You did quite a lot of projects where you would work just with one friend. Like I remember when you were taking the car apart on the front drive, you enjoyed working with one particular friend, didn't you? Doing that.
Yeah.
In fact, you still enjoy working with one friend on projects.
I think for anyone that's
Doesn't have to be
autism or ADHD, I think don't put your attention on the weaknesses. Play on the strengths. Because if in your case it's someone that's with autism and is interested in engineering, odds are they're going to have some areas of high functioning autism. It'll probably play to their strengths. I can understand the social aspects. That would be your biggest issue, but again, just play to the strengths. Sometimes the groups are distracting. You can keep it small, keep it simple, probably keep it more focused as a result.
But he's a whiz at building Lego Robot Wars.
There you go. So just keep that's how. Like I said earlier, I started when I was 9, 10, one Lego, and I was then sooner or later building radio controlled stuff, and then sooner or later building real stuff.
Right from the age you were 2 or 3, I could see that engineering passion coming through. You'd always be building and creating things, constructing things. So I'm aware we've kept you all long enough probably, but
how long do we need to?
Well, it's normally about an hour. We're an hour and 8, look. So I mean, what I love about your story is that you're a lifelong self-directed learner.
Yeah.
That's what I see in you, and I still see you continuing to drive your own learning and pursue multiple projects.
I think that's worth mentioning. At the moment, in my apprenticeship, because I joined at 16, a lot of apprenticeships that you join at 16, they don't usually expect you to do your degree, because if you're joining at 16, then the majority of people that would join would have struggled with A levels, and therefore going up to a degree level is a stretch. But I found myself not being offered the degree, but then I did it anyway just because I wanted to. I found myself falling behind no, that's not true. I set my own schedule with my degree
goals,
because I did it with an online provider. I set my own schedule, fell behind my schedule. I blamed social media, deleted all of my social media. I'm now back on track. That was something that I started self-directed. I was careful to remove the distractions, and obviously that doesn't have to apply to. That can apply to anything. Anything that you want to do, you can find it online. Start the process. If you really want to do it, you have to remove the distractions. And then
set aside the time. but I've admired the way you've continued to do that. You've continued to kind of forge your own path in the workplace as well to kind of achieve what you're working towards achieving. And I love the fact, Elias, that your work is like play, and that you have a job that you enjoy. And that was what we wanted for you really when we started out. That you'd be a lifelong self-directed learner who has work that feels like play every day. So it's been great to see you thriving in your area of passion.
One last call for questions.
Yeah, has anyone got a last question before we wrap it up? Thank you so all. Everyone's saying this has been very frank and informative and refreshing, so I'm glad. I hope that you've enjoyed it. And Samantha says her son is 10. She was talking about with the Lego robots, getting more and more into it. He builds and talks robots non-stop.
Yeah.
Elias used to talk engineering at me non-stop.
I'm sure that he'll just naturally play on his strengths, and as long as you facilitate that and don't get too to be honest, if he's got one strength and he enjoys it, you probably don't even need, I'm not sure if I'm right in saying this, but you probably don't need that diverse of an education, because if he's into robotics, the way the industry's going, he'll be set for life anyway. So
you've been working in the robotics lab,
yeah,
haven't
I've
you?
been recently doing
You've enjoyed that.
robotics at the university, and the industry's growing.
Lots of opportunities
as the demand
there.
goes up. So, if that's what he likes, then throw 100% at it and
play to the strengths. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for.
I'm sure he'll enjoy that support a lot, and it'll push him even harder. So, is there no other questions? Okay.
I don't think so. I can't see any more coming in. So if you've got any other questions, pop them in the chat underneath this live, and we can always look in on the Facebook group and answer them. So Rebecca, lovely to hear such an incredible fluid education and what great experience you've had and continue to explore. It's been really helpful to hear how you've dipped in and out of different learning methods. It's not necessarily one way throughout your whole journey. Yeah, that's definitely true, isn't it, Elias?
You can mix it up, find out what works, blend them together.
That's right, yes. So thank you for coming and joining us this evening. And thank you all for watching. And we'll see you soon. Take care. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Good night.